Hey everybody, welcome to the 440 Guitar Podcast. I am your host, Jerrell Powell. Thank you so much for tuning up. You can catch the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and anchor.fm/440. You can also follow the podcast here on Instagram at the 440 Guitar Podcast to get updates on the episodes coming out. We just recently hit 400 follows on Instagram, which in the grand scheme of things, it means nothing, but it means a lot to me. It's because I kind of started this from the ground up. So I appreciate everyone's support here on the podcast and kind of shares the vision of just really just being passionate about the art of music and guitar and just having really genuine conversations. So again, appreciate everyone's support. Feel free to continue to follow it. People know about the podcast. Today is a very exciting episode just because just paint a little bit of a story. So if those of you who are kind of followers of the podcast listen to it, they know that I'm a huge fan of Omar Rodriguez Lopez. I feel like he's like the Frank Zappa of this generation. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. And I got connected to Zechs Marquise from his brother, because I believe his brother plays drums, if I'm not mistaken, on a band called the Zechs Marquise. So went down the rabbit hole of the internet, if you will, and got connected to that band. And through that, hearing some of these great songs that they had, I really noticed the guitar player and just his playing and was really enthused, and this is when I was learning guitar at the same time. It's got acquainted with all of these different types of music. A lot of people say, oh, I'm a big fan of, I listen to everything. Well, I was listening to a lot more than the average person, especially learning. And I really dig this dude's playing. And I'm really happy to speak with him today. I'm very excited. It's kind of like a full circle moment for me. But the 440 Guitar Podcast, it's exciting to have Marco Smith on the show here. How you doing, man?
I'm doing awesome. I'm super, super pumped about you asking me to do this. So I'm pumped, man.
Dude, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny, man. I feel like there's been a lot of times where I've had to like hunt down some of my favorite players.
Yeah.
I'm just like, man, I wonder what they're doing now. Carson McWhirter, he was kind of the last one that I was like, wow, this is definitely a bucket list thing, because I was trying to find him for the longest time, and I think my episode's one of the first. I think it's one of the only like recent interviews from him,
Nice.
like on the internet, which is kind of crazy. So again, man, I'm really happy to speak with you on this. First and foremost, before we get started, how have you been? And I know, as far as just like when it comes to obviously like COVID stuff or whatever, but just how's creating been, regardless if it's been like, anything you've released public or just playing guitar, like how's that been for you, during these couple of years?
It's been interesting. Not a whole lot happened after Zechs until like 5 years ago. I've actually recently reconnected with Marfred, who played bass in Zechs Marquise.
Oh, cool.
We've been getting together as often as we can, given the circumstances, But so I've been creating with him. We're just trying to produce whatever comes out. Really, we listen to a lot of jazz and soul and hip hop and that sort of thing. So it's kind of has that to it, but we're rock musicians, But
nice.
And then before that, I had my own band called the Deep Shadows. But yeah. So I've actually been able to do a little bit. I do have a family. I do work full time. I'm actually an assistant principal of all things.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So with kids, with the family, with working full time, it's a little bit difficult to find the time, but I definitely try to do it. And like I said, lately, me and Marfred reconnected now. So I'm getting in there whenever I can, for sure.
That's great, man. I'm really happy to hear that too, especially because having such a huge responsibility, something as a principal, and having to deal with, the political nature on that, and then just time, and then being a father and a husband, or just all of those like adult things, and trying to fit in this creative, nature of you playing music. I definitely can understand that. So kudos to you on that, man.
Definitely.
So here on the 440 Guitar Podcast, we're really big on origin stories, how people got to where they are today. So to kick this off, to kind of just go back in time, Tell me about your first memory of music.
Yeah. My dad and mom used to have records in the house. They weren't like big music listeners or like huge music fans, but they had records in the house. I mean, from when they were young, so there were always records in the house. My dad used to have a guitar in the house. He never really played, but I always kind of just took an interest to it. Um, and then what really kind of got me into music was my brother. So my brother, he he's 5 years older than me, and you always look up to your brother and that kind of thing. He got into punk rock, and
Mm.
so when I was in middle school, actually, like even fourth, fifth grade, and then in middle school, that's what I was listening to, because that's what my brother listened to, and he used to go to shows, and which was kind of a foreign concept when you're in elementary and that kind of thing. But he used
Yeah.
to go to shows, and I remember him showing me at the drive-in. He took me to some at the drive-in shows.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, yeah. When I was real young, like early at the drive-in days, and he was acquainted with at the drive-in, not like super good friends, but like they would hang out a little bit and that sort of thing. So that was kind of my introduction into music. Yeah, but my first memory, like going way back, yeah, oh, just having records in the house, and then my dad had a guitar in there as well.
Wow, that's really
Yeah.
awesome. Do you recall the specific like punk bands that you were listening to, that your brother's music that you had? Was it like Bad Brains, or do you remember any kind of those bands?
I do. So I could even take a step further, right? So one of the records that my dad had in the house was just like, it was like a early 70s like radio, like top 40. And for whatever reason, I really liked that song by the Turtles. I think it's called like Together or something like that.
Mm.
Happy Together. I just remember playing that and playing that and playing that and playing that. And I don't know why it stuck with me.
Mm.
And all these years later, I collect records now. I
Oh,
have
wow.
tons of, and that's that's like my thing lately, is I collect records. But I eventually like ended up getting really into the Turtles later, But in terms of that stuff that my brother used to listen to, he started out with like the pop punk. So it was like Screeching Weasel and the Queers and those sorts of things, right? And then he got into like hardcore punk, so like Filth and like Grimple and those sorts of things. But
Nice.
yeah, and as much as like I loved all that punk stuff, um, it was really once I got into high school, um, all my friends who were skateboarders, they were all listening to hip hop, and obviously I was going to get into hip hop if I was hanging out with all my buddies and that sort of thing. So I got into hip hop,
Mm.
and then hip hop is what got me into collecting records. Like really got me into collecting records, because
Oh, the
I
crate digging.
remember totally, because I remember thinking like, hey, that song sounds like this other song. And I remember like digging up the records and be like, my dad's got that in his collection, or my mom had that in her collection. And that's kind of what got me started. But yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, the punk rock was there, but it was really what really got me into music was probably at the drive-in, that kind of stuff, and then a little bit later all the hip hop and soul and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Do you remember the moment of like your experience with like first getting acquainted with guitar, like learning it? Like, was it something where you were just like, oh, like I want to learn guitar, and like your father like was like gave you that instrument that was in the house, or how did that come about?
Yeah. So my brother, who again, he'd go to shows and listen to punk rock, he got himself a guitar
Mm.
and a little amp and that sort of thing. And then he would play some of those punk rock songs that he showed me. And that was for me in my mind. I was like, man, I want to learn to play that.
Mm.
And that guitar that my dad had laying around the house, my brother used to play like Nirvana riffs on it, and
Mm.
like some of the other early '90s like mainstream rock bands, and in my mind, I'm like, man, wait, that's what we're listening to. And there he is playing it. And for me, that's kind of what did it. I still would have been in probably fifth and sixth grade. And then eventually I got my own guitar, probably about sixth or seventh grade. And I told my mom, I was like, I want to take guitar lessons. And my mom, who has, admittedly, she'll tell you this story. She has zero musical talent, and she figured, she was like, you know what? I'm not going to tell him. I don't think he's going to get it. I don't think he's going to, you know, do well in music. She's like, but if that's what he wants to do, I'll go ahead and send him to guitar lessons. So I took guitar lessons for a couple years. But again, and my brother probably doesn't know this, but he was like a big part of the reason why I wanted to play guitar and why I got into music. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. It's funny you say that, because I remember when my mother put me in piano lessons, and then I was just like, man, I don't want to mess with this, man. I'm looking at, like, I don't see all these notes and I don't understand them. And then like 10 years later, I'm like, God, I wish I stuck with it.
I know, absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Oh man. What was your experience as far as like your first band, you know, playing together? Do you recall that moment?
I do. So I'm from the west side of El Paso, which is where I met Marfred and Marcel. We went to middle school together.
Oh wow.
But then but then in high school, I moved to the east side of El Paso. And when I was in a 10th grade, we started my first band. So there's this dude that I went to high school with named David Smith, and he played in a band called Part Time. And so he and I, we met. Unfortunately we were both in the retake algebra class. So you know, and he sat next to me, and we were like, hey, what's up? And for the weirdest reason, we found out we had the same last name. We both lived with only our moms. Our phone numbers had the same numbers in them. We both listened to like Jimi Hendrix, and we were just like, this is weird, dude. So
wow. Yeah,
so we started playing. And in those days, the big thing to do on the east side of El Paso, this is like late 90s, was backyard punk rock shows. So we'd go to the backyard punk rock shows, and then we met up with some other dudes that we went to high school with. This dude Andy on drums, and a friend of mine, Robert, who played bass. We started a band, and that's when like emo first hit El Paso. And we were but in those days, emo was different than what it is today, you know, like. So we started this band, and we wanted to call it emo, and like we were listening to 15 and Jawbreaker, and you know, some of that like sort of bluesy punk rock and that kind of thing. And so that's how that happened. I was about 9th or 10th grade, and me and my friend David, we started playing some stuff. So that's my first group. We were called we called ourselves Sally Ride, because the street that we practiced on, that was like, it was named all after female astronauts. All the streets in his neighborhood were all female astronauts, and so we call ourselves Sally Ride.
That's a pretty solid band name for a first band.
Yeah.
That's pretty solid. Yeah, because I remember one of my first bands was West Park Lane, and I was like, that is not ring. That is not catchy at all. As far as like playing, you know, it's funny. I always think about, you know, being like when you're starting off figuring out this musician thing, and then, you know, a core component as far as like playing live. Do you recall how you responded to like playing live, like in that band Sally Ride? Was it pretty natural to you, or is it just over time, and then it was just like I was in the zone at that point?
So that band actually only played one live show, and then I moved back to the west side, but that's when At the Drive-In was getting really, really big. Well, not they still hadn't like blown up super big, but that's when they were like getting big, you know, touring and all that sort of thing. And so in El Paso, they were the standard for live shows, which is like a really, really tough act to look at, because those dudes are jumping all over the stage, dancing. And then a lot of the bands from El Paso at that time who were hanging out with At the Drive-In, same thing. Like they were jumping around, getting crazy. And so I can remember that very first show that I ever played with that band Sally Ride. It was at a church, and I remember just going nuts on stage, and um, but it felt natural at the time. But I remember a couple of people being all, "Damn, that dude's going nuts over there," and I think a few people thought it was kind of weird, to be honest. But you know, and they had it all seen at the drive-in, and you know, bunch of other shows that were coming through, and but yeah, so then it really would have been with Zechs years and years later. So you know, after high school, that that the live thing started happening, and I don't think for me that it came that natural at first. It was super nerve-wracking for all of us. The two of the dudes, so Matt, who played the other guitar in Zechs Marquise, and then our first drummer, they had been in bands before. So they were used to playing live. But for me, it was pretty uncomfortable, but at the same time, like even a little bit, like even if there's, you know, 15 people watching the show and 3 of them are like checking you out playing guitar, that's still like a confidence builder, you know, like that dude's checking me out, you know, and and then that over time becomes like confidence on stage. And once you get that confidence and you want to be up there, like showing them what you got, man, that's where it's at for sure.
Nice. I wanted to ask you, as far as like your guitar playing style, like especially your solo playing style, there's a really interesting melodic nature to it that kind of like caught my ears, you know, when you would play and whatnot. Can you kind of tell me a little bit as far as just kind of how that, like how your soloing kind of like influenced, like how where those influences were?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think this probably happens with all guitarists, right? Like you have your bands that you listen to, and you know they're cool, but then there's those guitarists that you get into, and so Jimi Hendrix for sure. I mean, just like anybody who's like first getting into guitar, especially at that time, like that he was like a big thing for me at first. But his style is like, I mean, you hear that and you're just like, man, why am I even playing? Like dudes can play like that. What am I even doing over here? You know? So that was kind of that. And then, so I always kind of tried to play this sort of punk rock thing. But then once I started learning like scales and getting into jazz and listening to those types of dudes, even though I knew, and I'm not even like being hard on myself, like listening to dudes like Pat Martino and Wes Montgomery and those types of dudes, like my goal was never to play like them, because those dudes obviously spent hours and hours upon hours practicing, but like that sound was addicting to me. Just that the harmonic structure and the amount of notes they're playing and the way that it sounds against chords, and that really hit me. And then when we were in Zechs, we were just listening to like the hardest to play music that anybody could listen to, you know, because because we're always just trying to push the bar. So we were listening to tons of Miles Davis, tons of like Parliament Funkadelic, tons of jazz, tons of hip hop, and then believe it or not, we probably listened to less rock than anything.
Wow.
We did listen to, you know, a lot of the prog rock, Yes, and King Crimson, and you know those towards, and those the dudes that play band and or guitar in those bands are obviously like insane. So listening to all that stuff, and I pushed myself in that direction to try to play as different and as interesting as I can. And then you mentioned Frank Zappa, and I mean, just the amount of guitarists that I was listening to and all their different sounds, it kind of pushed me into that direction, you know?
Wow.
And when you listen to all this stuff on Zechs, the other guitar player, Matt Wilson, his style was a little bit more heavy, a little bit more like he liked to play like sort of dissonant and, you know, that sort of thing. And I was a little bit more bluesy, jazzy when I would play. But that's where that comes from.
Nice. It's interesting as far as you saying how you guys listen to almost anything but like rock music, and how that affects like you playing. Because I remember watching a video where Jubu Smith was talking about some of his influences, and he was like, I kind of listened to. He's like guitar pros are really the last thing I really listened to. He's like I kind of listened to everything else. I listened to saxophone players and all that stuff, and I was like, wow, I like never really would have known, you know.
For sure.
I was curious to ask as far as like a little bit when it comes to Zechs Marquise. When you guys created songs, was it something that was like really structured, or something where it was more of maybe like a Terra Mellos thing, where it's like there's these sections of like jamming out different sections and really just being able to lock in at different parts. How was your guys' song structures? Like how you guys created songs? Like was it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So someone would come in with a riff. And when I joined the band, Marfred, Matt, and another drummer at the time had already been playing together for a little bit, and Marcel, I believe, was also playing in the super early days before I started playing with them. So by the time I came in, they already had a lot of riffs kind of down, and then me just being the guitarist that I am, I just started throwing solos like, and some of the parts, and it was instrumental music. So that kind of happened that way. But then there were for sure these parts where we'd say, this is the intro, this is the chorus, and in this section, we're just going to let loose. And it was never like we're going to do this for 10 bars or we're going to do this for 12 bars. It was like, when I start coming up, you guys start coming up, or when the drums start getting loud, everybody starts getting loud. And then when I've had enough, I'll start looking at you guys, and we give each other just the kind of like the nod to be like, okay, here it comes, come back to the chorus. And we just hit it like that, you know?
Nice.
So we for sure had those sections where they were just like jams, and it's just amazing to be a guitarist who likes the solo in that kind of a band, because essentially like in every song there's going to be a section for you to let loose. And
Yeah.
man, that experience, especially doing it live, that's what's up, man. That's where it was at for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the songs you guys did was "Car Chasing Scene." I want to say that was like one of my favorite songs. Yeah, "Chasing" is one of my favorite songs. So awesome. I was like, wow, I can really picture a chase scene.
Yeah.
You know, so very very cool. Was it always intended for you guys to not have a singer? Were you guys going in like this is going to be an instrumental band?
No, we for sure at points considered, trying to ask various people to sing. And I don't think we ever like when we first started playing, I don't think we were trying to be like, let's strictly make this instrumental. I think it just kind of happened naturally. And then before we knew it, like the music had melodies and harmonies and solos, and it was just kind of like, these songs aren't written for singers.
Yeah.
But as funny as that is, later as our musical taste started to mature, and every single one of us like wishes that we could sing, and every single one of us would wish that we could compose and arrange and sing. And I've said it before, like and Marcel has said this too, like to be able to sing amazing, I would give all my production knowledge, all my studio knowledge, all my guitar, like if I can sing, man, I would give it all up, because so that I could sing. Because when I listen to a song, as much as I've geeked out to guitar and guitar solos, and I have a huge section of just jazz records where the guitar, like I still like I hear vocals, and it hits me harder than anything,
Yeah.
But yeah, so it wasn't necessarily intended to be instrumental, but it kind of happened that way, and we just kind of went with it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, definitely. Given no singer, no singer, definitely there's a real signature sound to it. That's really connected.
Yeah.
Connected with me. So definitely a really cool point in time. So tell me about, as far as after Zechs Marquise, what, as far as when it comes to music, like what were some of the things that you were cooking up or working on? Because you said you had another band as well, right?
Yeah, so we did Zechs, and because of various circumstances, we had to stop playing, which was a major bummer for every single one of us. Like, I knew I still wanted to play music, but I had started teaching, got married, and I kind of didn't play all that much. But I had always been into Ableton. So, Marcel, he's an insane producer. an insane synth player, an insane recording engineer. Like he's got all that kind of stuff. So we all kind of watched him, and he had the resources and the time and the means to like really dig into all that. So, and so I'd say me, I really was influenced by seeing all that. I got Ableton. I started producing like electronic stuff and recording guitar and that kind of thing. And I started writing songs, and I knew I wanted to play with a singer. I knew I wanted to play something not as heavy as Zechs. So I started writing songs, and I was working at the mall. And another guy that used to work in the mall, who was also from El Paso, who used to play in local bands, and he had seen Zechs and that sort of, he came in one day, he's like, hey man, I used to see Zechs play, our bands played. And he's like, I just want to let you know that I sing. And I was like, oh, dang. I was like, all right. So I had already been writing. I was eager to get something going. So he and I started linking up, and I already had a bunch of stuff, and I didn't know how it was going to work because I'd never played with a singer. I had never experienced that. So I said, hey, here's some stuff. I went over to his house, and right in his living room, and the guy's not shy. He just picked up the mic, started singing nonsense and improvising and jibber jabber. And I went home, cherry picked all the good parts, and I said, put lyrics to this. And luckily he could write really good lyrics.
Oh, nice.
And it came together, and we ended up recording 2 EPs and a couple singles for a group we had called the Deep Shadows. I had there was another guy who used to come out to Zechs shows named Joaquin, who played the drums, and he's like a jazz dude. And I was like, I like jazz. I don't want to play heavy rock. So brought him over. He had a friend who played bass, and we recorded some stuff with our buddy Chris Common from These Arms Are Snakes. And he engineered a couple EPs for us, and we did that for about 5 years. We just recently stopped playing it. It's almost like COVID kind of put a big obstacle in it. We couldn't play shows. We couldn't get together. So it had been 2 years, and we unfortunately we haven't been able to get together. But I want to say this: the last thing that he and I recorded, me and the singer, we did a Genuine cover of all people, right?
Oh, wow.
Genuine. I want to say it was one of the tracks that Timbaland produced. The name of the track is None of Your Friends' Business. And yeah,
that's a great album too. So I know that song.
I love that track. So I produced this like electronic beat to it. He sings over it, and that was the last thing that he and I did. And then I had you go through these moments where you're kind of just like, man, I don't get to play anymore. I don't get to, I'm getting a little bit older, and then Marfred comes into town. And he hits me up out of nowhere. I'm like, dude, we get together. We're like, let's write some stuff. And we've been hitting it pretty hard, Marfred and I. So nice. We're writing like together, but in terms of your question, the Deep Shadows is what I did. We've actually have an Instagram still. And
phenomenal.
You can find that stuff on Apple Music or wherever it's at, but it's a little bit more, it's still rock, but I'd say it's a little bit more less heavy, a little bit more R&B influenced, cool. That kind of thing. Yeah.
Nice. That's really cool. Yeah, that was going to be my next question as far as like how to get a hold of it, But that's cool. So it's on Spotify and Apple Music and stuff.
Yeah. Check it out when you get a chance. The Deep Shadows.
Cool. Very cool. Very cool. And then the stuff you're working on right now, with the bass player from Zechs, when do you expect some of that stuff to be available, you think?
So it's been a fairly slow process just because I work full time. And then, Marfred at some point, I'm sure he's going to get back out on the road with the Butcherettes or whatever it is that they're doing. We're playing like same. It's like we have this track that we're recording with a local artist who goes by A. Billy Free. She's this super soulful singer. That track is almost done. we got one more finished track. There's a girl named Sunny Baker who sang on some of the Zech stuff, like on one of the tracks. We threw her a couple songs. We're trying to make it, we're trying to get a bunch of different singers together. We wanted to ask, Matt Embry from our Expandeds. We wanted to ask even Terry from, they don't even know this yet, but we wanted to ask Terry from the Butcherettes and that kind of thing. Few people, but I'll keep some of that a surprise. Okay. In terms of when it's going to come out, man, I would love to get something out this year. I have a feeling Marford's probably going to start touring again after the summer, once things settle down. So I'm giving myself that time frame that I'm giving myself to the summer to have a bunch of it done. And we want to send it out to get mixed and then mastered. And we're recording it all ourselves. It's all like super DIY and cool. At his place and my place and that kind of thing.
That's great, man. Yeah, there's so many resources available to just the general public now. It's almost like to me, it should just inspire every artist to try to do some of these projects themselves, just like, especially with, I feel like that happened a lot too with, especially when the lockdown stuff was really heavy. I remember hearing like Kiana Lede and just like locking into like mixing her own album at the house and like audio interface and figuring that out and being a producer. It's just kind of like you're almost like kicking yourself if you're not doing that. So that's really cool that you guys got acquainted with it.
Absolutely. So I had a little bit of experience with recording from my home, but Marford within the last couple of years he's also picked it up. So it's almost like the pandemic pushed us to be like, hey, just start sending me stuff and you send me stuff and we can do it remotely. And even if I'm out of town, and it's a beautiful thing, man. It's a beautiful thing to be able to do music that way. And there's like you said, there's so many tools and there's like no excuse anymore. Like, I don't care if you're an assistant principal and you have kids and you know what I mean? Like there's like no excuse anymore, man. Like if you're going to play music, play some damn music, man.
Yeah. Seriously. It's funny. I was thinking, do you ever have like some of your students that are just like, I know you. Like, I'm a fan of that band, or fan of Zechs, or fan of Deep Shadows.
It kind of something along those lines. So there's obviously just a bunch of random videos of Zechs, and then there's stuff that we put up or stuff that the label put up. And if you look at some of the comments on some of the videos, some of them will say that's my teacher, or some of them will say, yeah, I remember once that that's my social studies teacher. So there's that aspect of it. Nice. It's kind of funny, but it's also kind of like I got to be careful too, because we played a show at a bikini bar, which is essentially like a strip club. They just don't take their clothes off, right? And I had no idea that there was footage of that. Oh wow! And one of my students found that footage, and he was like, "Hey, hey, isn't this you?" I was like, "Oh, yeah." I
don't know. There's a lot of Marco Smiths around.
But like, it's a common name, and that kid, he liked to push buttons, and he's like graduated from high school now, and he and I went through some times in school because he had kind of a tough situation, and we would get on each other's cases, but he was kind of in a joking way. He'd be like, "And what's that in the background?" I'd be like, I don't know. Yeah. That's the cool thing though, and maybe this is just me showing off a little bit, but when you work at a high school, you hear about all sorts of new groups and that sort of thing. And I remember a friend of mine, I say that because he's like 23 now, but he was a student. He's a local rapper now. He used to listen to like a bunch of good, hip hop rap in 2013, 14. And I remember him talking about Flying Lotus and Badu. And I just remember being like, damn, I met both of them, and it was just cool to be like, listen, hey, his name's Ken. I was like, I'm going to tell you a story. And I even showed him pictures of like, hey, that's me, that's Zechs, that's Philo, you know, and unfortunately, I don't have any pictures of myself with Erykah Badu, but still being able to be like, hey, dude, I did meet Badu, and she introduced us to Dave Chappelle
Wow.
and that sort of thing. And I think about that stuff now, man. That's like in a dream. And did that even really happen? But um, those were some of my favorite memories, you know. But
Wow.
yeah.
That's crazy. Wow. I was gonna ask you as far as like the type of gear, guitar gear that you're doing now. What's your main axe? Is it's that same Strat from Zechs, or did you kind of try
I'm
some
so glad you
different
asked.
instruments?
So glad you asked. So I started out my very first guitar. I don't even remember what it was. It's like $100 guitar. I don't even have it no more. Then I got that Strat, which was I bought off of a friend of mine who was really influenced by Prince, and of course we all know Prince can shred on
Oh
guitar,
yeah.
and that dude can play. That the dude that I bought the guitar from, he could play really well, and
Mm.
so to have that guitar, I was just I couldn't believe I had that guitar, and that guitar that the year that it's like an early 90s model, and it came with tuning locks, and it came with this weird nut bridge, and it's all like modded out, and that's
Wow.
just the way that model came. So to be like in 10th grade and have that guitar, to me was just like, man, I need to forever thank my mom. And I'm bringing up that guitar because that guitar is my baby. I toured with it. It's got my soul all over it. So I
Mm.
want to make sure that I mention it before I talk about my other two guitars, right?
Oh, absolutely,
So
absolutely.
then I had ended up also getting an SG. Probably it was probably like a late 90s, early 2000s model.
Mm.
Um, Terrible story. I opened it up out of the box because I had ordered it, and it was sitting on my front porch. Bring it inside, lay it on top of the couch. I open it, and the guitar just falls straight out of the box onto the floor and lands on the headstock.
Oh my god.
And it was like, and it was
Oh.
like, and it was like the $2,100 model. It wasn't like,
Oh
you know,
jeez.
so, you know, luckily it didn't affect it that bad.
Yeah.
And then Matt Wilson from Zechs, he ended up needing it. I ended up throwing the SG his way.
Mm.
We worked out a deal, and then and I'll mention this. I'll honor him. So my wife's father, he passed away a few years back. And we all knew it was coming. And he's sitting down on the couch, and he sits down with me. He's like, hey, her father says, what's your dream guitar? I was like, I don't know, like a 1970s Les Paul. He goes, show me one. And then I showed it to him on eBay,
Mm.
and he puts buy it now. And
Oh wow.
I was like a 1970 Les Paul. I was like, what's going on? He's like, essentially that was his parting gift to me,
Oh
man.
wow.
A 1970 Les Paul, right?
Wow.
So, you know, I have that guitar. I'm going to tell you a horror story about the guitar. I come home one day, and it's standing on the guitar stand in the living room, and the headstock is completely cracked. And
Oh my god.
I'm like, one, that's a 1970 Les Paul. I'm like, two, my wife's father gave that to me, you know?
Yeah.
Um, we don't know how it happened. A couple people said some things. Um, Luckily, a dude, a local guy in El Paso, um, he lived out of town forever. He moved back to El Paso. He like builds his own guitars. He's got a showcase at NAM and everything. So um, I hit him up. I was like, hey, don't you fix the guitar? He put it back in pristine shape. You
Oh
can't
wow.
even tell that it was ever cracked. Okay.
Wow. Thank God.
But yeah, yeah. Now, by the time
Wow.
I got that Les Paul, it was broken most of the time, so I didn't get to use it. I didn't really get to play it live. I played live with it once with the Deep Shadows.
Hmm.
Okay, but the guitar that I've used the last couple years, or at least when did I get that thing? At least the last year and a half. Um, so I've always wanted, you know, I would say I'm most influenced by jazz guitarists.
Hmm.
So I wanted a hollow body,
Ah.
but you see those things, and you know, if I'm going to get a hollow body, I'm not going to get a 90s or you know, a new hollow body. I wanted one of those jazz ones.
Right.
But the thing about that is, if you find a 1970s hollow body, you're looking at $8,000 to $15,000, you
Yeah.
know. But I found a 1983, which happens to be the year that I'm born. And I not that long ago, I graduated my master's degree, and it was my birthday, and my wife, we got together and we got me a 1983 Gibson ES 175. Ooh,
Ooh,
so
that's a nice model.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, it's got the sharp cutaway on the one end, super thick hollow body.
Mm,
That's what I've been using. That I use it almost exclusively now, just
wow.
because it's got that jazz sound, and it looks like it looks so beautiful that that's the only one that I play now.
Wow. And
Yeah,
is that a relatively light guitar too,
it's uh,
comparatively?
so my 1970 Les Paul weighs a
A
ton.
tank, right?
It's a tank, man. My Strat weighs like just as much as my Les Paul. They're both really heavy guitars, man.
Wow.
Um, and I, you know, like in the guitar world, even though there's not really any truth to it, like a heavy guitar is a badass guitar, and it must mean that it's high quality. So you know, I just remember always showing off how heavy it was, and because you pick up other dudes' Strats and they don't weigh a thing,
Seven
you know.
pounds.
Yeah,
You're just
I
like,
never
oh.
understood. I'm like, why is mine so damn heavy? But that must mean I'm the man, because I've got that guitar, right? But so comparing the ES 175 to those, it doesn't seem that heavy. It is fairly light, especially for how big it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, because that's kind of the reason why I had to stray away from Les Paul because I'm like my back is like cussing me out right now.
I feel you, man. I totally feel you. And I'm 5'7". Man, I wouldn't I honestly feel like I have like shoulder damage or something.
Oh
And
man.
you know, because you when we would tour, sometimes we would be out on the road 7 weeks, and we'd only have 3-4 days off, and you know, being a little dude and lugging that thing around. But yeah, man.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I had them heavy ones.
And then just kind of going into like pedals, like I feel like a lot of, at least from like even just like talking about Zechs a little bit, I feel like it seemed like a lot of your sound was just kind of like coming into the amp, and you had your wah pedal, a couple things, but it seemed like you kind of let the amp do a lot of the work as far as your tone. Is that still kind of the same thing now, or have you kind of like switched a few things up as far as pedals?
That's like you're exactly right about that. So I do have pedals, but Matt was always the pedal guy. Like he's just better with it. Like
Mm,
he can get better tones. He knows how to do it better. And of course, Marcel once there was a time when he was playing keys, and he's just like a gear junkie,
mm,
like, and he knows how to fix all that stuff. And so he had just the insane amounts of synths, and so those dudes were doing all the effects. And
mm.
as much as I wanted to be able to do it, I just couldn't ever figure out how to do it right,
Yeah.
But the thing that I loved was the wah. I was
Yeah.
all over the wah constantly, man. So
Nice.
I would essentially just do a little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay,
Mm,
have a distortion for solos, and then but the wah was my favorite thing.
nice.
Now I'm just like straight into the interface,
Mm,
and I'll just put a little bit of reverb and delay. And but Marfit has also recorded some other stuff with Matt recently, and Matt, again, he's just killing it with these tones. I'm like, damn, how does that guy do that? And so I'm like, maybe I need to look into it.
nice.
But and then I go home and I listen to a jazz guitar record, and it's just straight in and beautiful. I'm just like, that's how I want to sound,
Right.
and
Right.
so I tend to shy away from it a little bit. But lately it's just been straight in. But I'm gonna start messing around with it a little bit more.
Nice. Your WAPL, were you using the Crybaby or Vox, or what were you using?
I used a Crybaby for a long time, but they're just not good on the road,
Yeah, they break a
wear
lot,
and
right?
tear. So I used a Crybaby. Um, there's the one that has the red button for like the boost or whatever, that one. And then for a while, because I had already gone through three Crybabies, Marcel had an Ernie ball.
Mm.
So I used the Ernie ball, and it was amazing because on the Crybabies, there's no indicator light. You don't know if it's on or off.
Oh, yeah.
And on the Ernie ball, there's an indicator light. And I was like, man, the indicator light's the way to go. Like, because you turn on your amp and your guitar, and you didn't realize that your wall was on, and you're trying to adjust your amp, and you're
exactly.
just like, you know. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. Very cool, man. Awesome. Awesome. Well, any lasting thoughts or anything else that you might want to plug for some of your fans and listeners to keep in tune before we close out?
Yeah, man. I would just one more time want to mention my group, the Deep Shadows. Even though we're not active anymore, I would love for people to check out the Deep Shadows. I would love for people to be on the lookout for some stuff that Marfred and I are doing. We don't have a name yet. We're like, the project's is in its infancy. Also, we didn't. I just wanted to throw out there that I collect records, and if anybody is ever looking to get rid of any, hit me up. I'm always looking for records, man. Nice. But yeah, other than that, man, it was amazing talking to you. This was super fun for me.
Oh, awesome, man. Awesome. Of course. Likewise. Is there a particular record you're trying to hunt down right now?
I'm always looking for guitar jazz. Any especially like George Benson before he got big solo, because he used to play with a lot of organ players, and some of that stuff's kind of hard to find. But anything with jazz guitar in it, man.
Nice.
But
is he your favorite jazz guitar player, or who's your fave?
Man,
if you have
so. Here's the thing about George Benson, and I recently saw an interview with Pat Martino about this. So once he got big, he was pushed in that sort of mainstream, sort of fusion smooth jazz way, right?
Yeah.
But if you can find the records with those one or two songs where he's not playing that kind of stuff, man, like it's Uptown with George Benson, where he plays I think it's Willow Weep for Me, shredding, right? So he has some of my favorite moments. I would say Pat Martino.
Nice.
Because Pat Martino never went the smooth jazz route, right? He kind of stayed true to his sound. Right. So Pat Martino, I'd say overall in the grand scheme, but I mean, how can you forget about Wes Montgomery or John McLaughlin or all those other dudes? But yeah, man. Yeah. I could talk all day about jazz guitar.
We might need another episode because I'm a big fan of jazz guitar too. So
awesome.
Very cool. Well, there you have it, folks. This is Jerrell Powell here from the 440 Guitar Podcast. We will jam again soon, and have a great rest of your day.